There's this old line about trade negotiations that all the real action happens at 1 minute before midnight. Well, the deadline for Canada to join a U.S. Mexico trade deal, which could replace NAFTA, is like midnight tonight. Negotiators from the three countries are racing against the clock to try and get a deal done. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland delayed her big speech at the United Nations yesterday to stay in Ottawa for 11th-hour consultations at the Prime Minister's office. The stakes are really high and made higher by the public sniping of Donald Trump, which we heard more of last night.
We've reached a deal to replace the horrible NAFTA, one of the worst trade deals ever, with a brand new U.S. Mexico trade deal. And we'll see what happens with Canada.
We'll see. When the NAFTA negotiations began, Trudeau and Freeland tried a charm offensive on the U.S., but increasingly, Canada's been playing hardball. While Donald Trump has been pushing a U.S.-Mexico deal, threatening a new auto tariffs on Canada, huge, Trudeau and Freeland have dug in, even stalling negotiations for 2 weeks.
The justification under your rules for the imposition of these tariffs was a national security consideration. So what you are saying to us and to all of your NATO allies is that we somehow represent a national security threat to the United States. And I would just say to all of Canada's American friends, and there are so many, seriously?
Yeah, that's a huge deal for Freeland. And then things started to change actually quite dramatically. On Thursday, Trudeau called the incoming Mexican president, Lopez Obrador, and they agreed to tell Trump that Canada must be included in the deal. Team Canada, as Freeland likes to refer to them, has now gambled that it can get a better deal by staring down the deadline. But with the clock ticking, there's a lot at stake. Joining me is Patrick Leblond. He's a professor of international affairs at the University of Ottawa. Joining me is Patrick Leblond. He is a professor of international affairs at the University of Ottawa. So, Patrick, Donald Trump is still playing hardball here. The stakes are huge. Can you outline for us what this could mean for Canada's economy if there is no deal?
Well, if there is no deal, there are two things that are threatened by the Trump administration and Mr. Trump itself. One is actually a pullout of the United States from NAFTA, so Canada would lose its free trade access to the U.S. market. The second part is that the Americans would also impose tariffs, either 10 or 25% is not clear, on the auto sector.
And of course, there's lots of talk of possible concessions on the dairy industry. That could be a massive effect on dairy farmers in Quebec in particular, where half of that industry is. But I wanted to talk to you, too, about how there's been quite a change in approach from Team Canada towards Donald Trump. At first, there seemed to be a charm offensive. Lately, it seems they've been prepared to stare down this deadline. What do you think of the handling of the way that Canada has chose to handle the negotiations the last couple of weeks, this tougher approach?
Well, I don't think the approach is actually that much tougher than it was from the beginning. I think the Canadian side always welcomed the opportunity to renegotiate NAFTA. They always said, look, we want a good deal. We want to modernize NAFTA. We're negotiating good faith. But we're not going to accept the bullying by the United States. We're not going to accept a bad deal for Canada because this is something that we would have to live with for a very long time. But certainly at first, we tried to be nice and everything. And then with more and more pressures, all these deadlines that have been imposed on Canada, like this is the final deal that you can get. Otherwise, the Canadians have just kept, they're cool and going forward and really, testing in a way all this bluffing and huffing and puffing, if you want, from the U.S. side. And so far, it seems that the strategy is working. And of course, at the same time, there was a lot of engagement by Canada on the U.S. side, trying to build allies and a coalition to support us. And I think to some extent, we're seeing some of that pressure playing out now and not kind of freaking out or panicking in front of the threats by Mr. Trump.
Well, they say everything happens a minute to midnight, and I remember from the first free trade agreement back in the late 80s that they actually stopped the clock, so it could go past midnight. Well, I'll be watching this. Patrick, thank you so much for talking to us this morning.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Wendy.